Good afternoon, everyone. Melwood, let's keep this through. If we want to close the door, please. Let's close it. Keep it open, yeah? Because the number is there, but that door is closed. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you again. And it's a pleasure to present today's speaker to you in this car seat seminar. It's my pleasure, Dr. Aisulu Baidova, who I have known since 2018. Dr. Aisulu Baidova recently graduated from our own school. I have had the pleasure of working with her on a manuscript that analyzed the representation of gender in Kazakhstani school textbooks. However, today she's not talking about gender or school textbooks. Today she's going to share her PhD research with us. And her research looks at how middle leaders construct their professional identities in a very highly centralized and hierarchical educational or school context. Thank you very much, Aisulu. We look forward to your research. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure today to present, meet you, and to talk about my thesis, not at my defense, but as just a scholarly conversation and present the findings to you. I know the car seat is more about the Central Asian context, all the research that is produced here. And today I wanted to refocus a little bit the findings of my studies and talk about the educational context in which we all work in. Right? It's very centralized and very hierarchical. It's very paternalistic culture. And today I would like to share my findings more toward the context. Well, if you, I will just look a little bit at my notes. It's been about 2 months that I haven't looked at this text, so I apologize for that. Well, my topic is about leadership identity construction and how individuals become leaders. We're all leaders at different times, at different situations, right? And in my study, I looked at middle leaders, not the senior leaders that are usually represented by principals, deputy principals in our schools, but at middle leaders, that level that is so under-recognized, unfortunately, and underutilized. And today I will share how important they are in the school context. And we'll look at how they build their leadership identities in such centralized context, which is quite very different from what is usually written in the literature around the world on middle leaders. So that, I think, the significance of my study today, I would like to talk about it. It should be working. Can we get the IT guy back?
I think we try clicking on it.
No, because it used to work before. Okay. Okay, thank you. So I will share with you the background, the problem statement, research purpose, the literature review, and the methodology that I used for my study, the findings, and discuss it with the literature, share some conclusion, and the limitations and recommendations of my research. Okay, so in schools, middle leaders play an important role. And they usually act as a bridge between the teachers and the senior leaders. They have a significant impact on improving classroom teaching and student learning. And they work closely with teachers and manage smaller teams, which positions them well to influence daily practice. So they are the key people who work with those smaller groups of teachers, and they can influence and track and monitor their progress, what they do. They can influence on how the policies are enacted. So they are the key people that today would be the focus of my research. So they're uniquely situated also between the policy and practice. And this allows them to effectively translate the school's strategic goals translate the policies, communicate these plans to their departments, and then interpret these policies into practical implementation. In the context of Kazakhstan, these roles and responsibilities take on additional significance. We know that our country aims to be one of the world's top 30 economies by 2050, and we recognize that education is a key to building a competitive workforce. And to reach this goal, Kazakhstan has implemented rapid educational reforms. These are shift to 12-year schooling, criteria-based assessment, renewed curriculum, trilingual education. So all these reforms are there to make sure that the country has enough capacity to get into that top 30 ranking. So these changes, of course, highlight the critical need for strong leadership within schools. So if we want to implement all these reforms, we need the people, the leadership capacity to implement them. So to address this need, there is a project that's called Leading School Project that was initiated by the Ministry of Education, and it identifies effective schools which are tasked with sharing best practices in instruction and teaching research, and then they share it with other schools in the region. Since 2018, the number of leading schools, they're called leading schools, doubled from 765 to 1,711 schools. So these are the leading schools that are good schools, and they partner with, we call it non-leading schools, yeah, or magnet school they're also called, and they reach around 5,246 schools today. So this is the way how education reform gets implemented, by partnering good schools with those schools that need additional support. Despite decentralization efforts and ongoing reforms, however, traditional cultural values such as collectivism, paternalistic culture, reliance on guidance from superiors, Soviet legacy, they still influence how Kazakhstan, what school leadership models are present in our schools. So heads of departments play a significant middle leadership role, but their potential is often underutilized, it is undervalued, and is underrecognized. So existing research is quite limited. This is actually the first doctoral study in Kazakhstan about heads of departments. And existing research primarily focuses on Western perspectives and lacks empirical studies of middle leadership in centralized, hierarchical, and such paternalistic educational contexts. So these unique contexts usually present challenges that can affect middle leaders' effectiveness and their experiences. Therefore, there is a need for studies that explore how middle leaders develop their leadership identities, how they become leaders in such contexts. The study explores how heads of departments in 2 secondary schools in Kazakhstan construct their leadership identity, and how their experiences, relationships, and interactions as middle leaders contribute to this process. So to address this purpose, the following overarching and sub-questions guided the study. So this first sub-question aims to explore how their individual understanding, experiences, and practices in their leadership role, so what they do. The second sub-question seeks to understand the relational aspects of leadership, highlighting the influence of social interactions, because they work together with teachers, the senior leaders, so they are the link. The third sub-question examines the experiences, interactions, and the relationship that shape their identity. So overall, these 3 sub-questions help us answer the overarching research question. Empirical studies on middle leadership suggest that leading from the middle creates coherence, increases efficiency, and enhanced performance in a complex system, whether at the school level or a whole system change. So effective departmental leadership has a strong positive impact on overall school performance, school improvement, and the implementation of reforms. In contrast, HODs can also contribute to departmental ineffectiveness. So to be effective leaders, they need to develop the identity that provides motive to act, to be leaders. And we know that leadership identity is dynamic, it is relational, and it is context dependent. So this involves exploring questions such as, who am I, and who do others know me to be? So through this relational, reflexive practice, individuals understand who they are as leaders. Leadership identities develop at 3 levels: individual internalization, where one understands their own identity; relational recognition, which is shaped by how others perceive them; and collective endorsement, as influenced by the broader context. At the individual internalization level, how individuals view themselves and their roles can be shaped by their personal biographies, for example, individual characteristics, leadership education. So if I know that I'm a leader, I will go and act like that. Yeah. If I hesitate about that, I'm not leader-like, then I will not take that extra responsibility or take initiatives. At the relational level, recognition and acknowledgement from colleagues contribute to identity construction. And what is important is the source of recognition is crucial. For example, when leadership is granted by individuals who are senior or authoritative positions, is perceived as more impactful. So if my professor says, Aisulu, I believe in you, you can do this, it's more powerful than if my peers say, Aisulu, you can do this, right? So especially in our context, the recognition, the support of superiors is very impactful. Positive and negative role models can also significantly influence one's understanding of the kind of leader they aspire to be or avoid being. For example, if my director is a negative kind of role model, I know what kind of leader I don't want to be. The relational trust that heads of departments manage to build with their colleagues, both within the department and across the school, also impacts their leadership identity when they're asked, for example, for professional advice. So if I know that I'm asked, Aisulu, can you help me with this? I know that you did a great PhD thesis. Could you support me with this? And okay, they recognize me as a strong scholar, for instance, right? And it influences my scholarly identity, right? If I'm asked about professional advice as a leader, then I know it makes me a better leader now. Not a better, but more of a kind of leader, and influences my identity. Organizational culture in schools often mirrors the broader societal culture. So in societies with high power distance, there was a big study of 160 cultures, I think, if I'm not mistaken, across the world, and they are these countries with a high power distance, when there is a distance between those in power and those with no power. Kazakhstan is one of those. So the countries where there is a top-down leadership prevails and subordinates typically expect guidance from superiors, again, as in Kazakhstan. In former USSR states, the legacy of Soviet Union is still present, is still evident, and power is usually concentrated in the hands of the senior leaders and the authority of the state. So several theories in identity research explain how identity is constructed. However, many overlook the reciprocal nature of identity development within this leader and follower relationships and the impact of societal culture. For example, there is this identity work theory. So they look at identity, but the ones that take into consideration the context and the relational nature of the middle leader position is this leadership identity construction theory by Deru and Ashwood, actually. This theory views leadership as dynamic, socially constructed, and relationally practiced. So to understand how heads of departments become leaders, a social constructivist approach is most appropriate, because they construct their identities through interactions with their colleagues and the context, thus constructing their individual version of reality. So to capture this complexity and nuances of this process, I used a qualitative embedded multiple case study research design. At some point, I was so mad at myself that I really complicated the research design because there was so much data and I really was drowning in it. But then when the study finished, I realized that this was the most appropriate, I think, research design. It really helped me to answer my research questions and capture this complexity of their role. Maybe at some point later, I will reflect on this and reconsider. Yeah, but I would be very happy if you could share how else this study also could be done. If you have any ideas, please share. So this design allowed me to explore a phenomenon in a bounded system from a context-specific perspective. This research design also enabled me to gather comprehensive data from multiple sources and multiple perspectives, ensuring that each head of department's case was constructed individually while providing a holistic view of the phenomenon across different school contexts. So to grasp the relational aspect of their role, I interviewed senior leaders, their superiors, teachers with whom they worked, whom they are the leaders now, and local educational authority representative to understand how the broader context views them. I used semi-structured interviews, document analysis, and non-participant observations as my data collection methods. And to ensure the depth and breadth of findings, it is suggested to use more than one type of coding method. And so in the first cycle, I employed descriptive coding just to create a list of emerging topics. In the second cycle, I used in vivo coding to prioritize the participants' voices in the analysis. And my analysis was carried out in 2 stages, the within case and the cross case analysis. Now let's talk about the research sites and participants. Again, I said I quite made it very complicated, but today I hope I will be able to explain. So the embedded multiple case study means that within one context, which is the case, bounded system, there are 3 different cases of heads of departments. So I have a school, and within that school, I have 3 cases of my heads of departments. And I have 2 schools, like 2 different systems. So this, the embedded multiple case study design implies that within the school, which is a case context, there are 3 cases of heads of departments, which is my embedded units of analysis, from subject areas. And I need to justify what kind of subject areas I want to choose. In Kazakhstan, we have a unified national test, UNT. This is a high-stake exam, and usually student learning outcomes are measured against UNT scores, and this test is considered as a school, teacher, and departmental performance indicators. So heads of departments were therefore selected from compulsory UNT, elective UNT, where there are usually less number of students, and there is less pressure and less resources usually, and non-UNT, and those subjects that are not considered as important like physical education, art, self-reflection. We had a subject like that. So this study was conducted in 2 mainstream schools to investigate how heads of departments construct the leadership identity in both similar contexts, because both schools have a national curriculum, there are state policies and type of ownership is the state, and different circumstances. Like one school is leading school, is the one that is tasked to showcase their best practices, and the one that they call non-leading, so the partner school, magnet school, etc. There's a principles leadership style is different in those schools, and there are specific school environments. Usually it's the different student body, different number of teachers, etc. So both research sites are located in Astana. One is a leading and other is labeled as non-leading. Each school had 3 heads of departments, 2 teachers per department, 1 senior leader, and 1 local educational authority representative, making a total of 20 participants. The research sites and participants were selected using a purposeful sampling strategy. I also did document analysis, which included heads of department job descriptions, their annual plan, and state regulations. Non-participant observations were the most difficult to conduct because it was during the pandemic and the schools were closing and opening and closing and opening. It was difficult to get into this meetings, whole school, pedagogical school meetings that take place only once a term. And I often was forgotten to be invited to them. So I had to wait for the second whole school meeting, so departmental meetings and different staff room and even hallways, because I really needed to make good use of the time that I spent in the school when it's open. Well, regarding research ethics, the study adheres strictly to the ethical principles of Nazarbayev University, and I think it was very important because there were some power issues between the middle leaders talking about the senior leaders and the senior leaders talking about middle leaders and teachers talking about middle leaders. So I really had to be careful about the questions I asked, how I keep everything they say as confidential. Now let's talk about the findings. Well, the findings and discussion are organized according to the embedded multiple case study design and the theoretical framework guiding this research. Well, I thought that it's kind of easy to understand looking at why I chose the design and how it helped me to answer my research question, and also how I used the theoretical framework and how it helped me to, again, meet the purpose of my study. So if we look at the concept, I needed to ask how they understand leadership, because leadership is usually in our context understood differently from what it is like in Western context, right? And I needed to explore how my participants, understand leadership. And what is interesting is that they understand leadership as leading by example, empowering others, and promoting teamwork towards shared goals. To me, this was very surprising because it sounds more of a Western perspective of leadership, right? And I tried to interpret the shift towards the Western view of leadership as being influenced by current school reforms and the large-scale national professional development program that was developed by the University of Cambridge. So we could see that how the professional development that was developed by the Western partners actually brought these understandings of what leadership is like around the world. Okay. And the impact of school reform would be arising quite often here in my findings as well. So let's look at the leading school status. So I initially assumed that the schools participating in this project would offer more leadership opportunities and responsibilities for heads of department. The project's goal is to share best practices in instruction and teacher research with partner schools. However, the findings showed that heads of departments were not directly involved in this project. So there was a coordinator in charge of that. They were not involved directly beyond just organizing lesson study groups in their departments. And that's it. So as a result, there was very little difference between in their role between the two schools, the leading and non-leading. So my assumption was kind of wrong. This is how I try to interpret it. Now, if you look at the subjects now, it's the UNT subjects, the challenges and opportunities within departments vary widely. For example, for non-UNT subjects, the lack of regular assessments offers more chances for leadership. So they're more relaxed. They don't have much more workload as those in the compulsory or elective departments. Therefore, they can be creative, they participate in all sorts of activities, they practice leadership within and beyond the school. And since they teach more than they lead, there is a shift towards them acquiring, in other departments, they teach more than they lead. They are too overwhelmed. That's why they develop more of a teacher identity rather than a leadership. So their workload of these important subjects, they actually influences what kind of identity they develop. Also, there are multidisciplinary departments, and being a head of department in those is particularly challenging. These roles require proficiency in the pedagogy and content of multiple subjects, and usually they're bigger in size. That's why it's much more difficult to monitor individual teacher performance and to provide support in the preparation for the high-stake teacher appraisal. Actually, teacher appraisal, again, would be arising quite often here. So if we look at how others see their role, which is also interesting, because they expect too much, and their role is usually multi-faceted and highlights their diverse responsibilities and expectations from others. So they are expected to translate policies. In the context of current school reforms, teachers view heads of department as policy translators. So they translate the abstract policies that they normally don't understand into meaningful implementation in daily practices. Heads of departments sell these policies. So teachers buy in and get involved in implementing new ideas, reforms, and initiatives. So the role is quite important, if you can see, right? Representing and advocating. So heads of departments are uniquely positioned to understand day-to-day challenges and needs of teachers. This connection enables them to accurately identify and raise specific concerns. Interviews suggest that in both case study schools, teachers tend to view the head of department as their advocate to the senior leaders. They act as a collegial bridge between the department and the school. And schools, senior leaders in the HN understand that heads of department are their extension, and only with them and through them, they can stay connected to teachers. It's good that they understand the value of this position. Now, managing talents is also an interesting finding. By recognizing and utilizing individual talent strengths and areas for growth, heads of departments can align opportunities with each teacher's specific needs. Through preparation for high-stake teacher appraisal, they support and monitor teachers' progress, helping them meet the criteria and prepare for the next milestone in their teacher career. Senior leaders expect heads of departments to act as comprehensive human resource managers. So this includes selecting teachers, motivating them to stay in the job, to keep them and not to leave, and support through their professional development and appraisal process. These findings reveal that heads of departments face complex and varied expectations from those they interact with in their middle leader role, and to what extent they impact on the heads of departments' leadership identity, I will discuss in the next section. Now, if we look now from the perspective of the theoretical framework, findings from individual cases now of heads of departments reveal that they experience low self-belief in their leadership abilities. So they say, I'm not leader-like, I'm not a leader, I'm just a good doer. They say this often occurs among those with limited prior experience in leadership role or those who are new to their position as a head of department. They tend to doubt their leadership abilities and prefer to call themselves doers rather than leaders. As a result, they may question their leadership abilities, adopt the follower position, and feel demotivated to stay at this heads of departments role that requires active leadership. There are also heads of departments who perceive themselves as natural leaders or have very strong self-belief in their organizational and leadership skills. They are more likely to engage in leadership practices within the school and beyond through servicing committees, trade unions, organizations of significant city level events. So this national Republican level events are quite a big deal apparently in our schools. Middle leaders are in need of leadership training, which none of the heads of departments had received. So they tend to receive only, the meeting will end in 10 minutes. Okay. So the middle leaders did not have leadership training. Why? Because they are mostly recognized as teachers, and they have access only to teacher training rather than leadership training that is only available to senior leaders. There is a very high stake emphasis on teacher appraisal, and they say if we have a certificate or a diploma and we're certified leaders, will be recognized more as leaders. And so there is a very high value placed on certificates and diplomas with the teacher appraisal, I think. Therefore, if heads of departments were to receive leadership training certificates or just leadership training, it would not only boost their self-confidence, but also help them gain recognition from teachers and respect as legitimate leaders. Now, if we look at the relational recognition, heads of departments often adopt specific leadership styles and practices that they have learned from their role models, who typically include senior leaders or those teachers who they regard as strong leaders. So the influence of these role models can be both positive and negative, shaping their perceptions of the types of leaders they want to be or they don't want to be. So this finding exemplifies the role of senior leaders as beacons of significant individuals who model behavior, practices, and the quality of interactions that others adopt. So those senior leaders, if you are senior leaders, please know that how you act usually is copied by those who follow you. So heads of departments work closely with senior leaders, and recognition from these superiors significantly influence their leadership identity construction. This dynamic is not unique to Kazakhstan. In many educational contexts, the endorsement of superiors often has a greater impact on than that of peers. So who recognizes you as a leader is very important. To heads of departments, relational trust, when others trust in me, serves as an enabling factor, which contributes positively to their identity. When teachers seek advice from heads of departments, they acknowledge that and affirm their leadership. They recognize them as strong in pedagogy, in subject knowledge, in teaching practices. So for teachers in Kazakhstan, heads of department has to be strong as a subject teacher. Yeah. So if they're not strong enough in pedagogy of the subject and knowledge of the subject, especially mathematics, physics, they're not recognized as a strong teacher, as a strong leader. Now, if we look at the collective endorsement of how a broader context views them, in regard to decision making, heads of department's role is advisory. So they don't have the final say, they just advise, they recommend. And it is specified in the job description and existing regulations. Although their role is advisory, their recommendations are heard and are often accepted. So in our schools, we do have this distributed leadership. Their role, what they say is heard, and the senior leaders really pay attention to what they say. But on the other side, they do not appear to be dissatisfied that they have this advisory role. So my first assumption was that, oh, these middle leaders, poor middle leaders, their voices are not heard. They're all just advisory and they do not participate in decision making. They don't mind. They really don't mind. Why? Because in our culture, we still follow the decision making of the superiors. We want guidance from them, and we want them to make this final decision. So like in other contexts, when middle leaders are given power, given decision making, etc. they don't want this power. They say, thank you. We will just advise and recommend. That's it. Yeah. So the existing budgeting and funding structures within schools present additional barriers. The current financial system does not allow schools to compensate heads of departments for their role. So this is an unpaid role. And if your role is unpaid, which means it is not recognized as a leadership position. That's why you don't have training. That's why your role is advisory. That's why you are viewed only as teachers. And this sends heads of departments a big message saying that, okay, in this school we value you, but somewhere in the Ministry of Education, where they decide on the money that you should pay for the role, we don't see you as important people. Okay? And to them, it's a big red flag in a way that who are we in this context? What do we do in our school? And that affects their leadership identity construction. Novice heads of departments face challenges due to their age and limited experience. I think this is very cultural thing, often facing skepticism from older colleagues. Well, older cohorts benefit from greater power and authority. They have better access to resources. They know how to secure better resources for their departments. They have the say. So this finding reflects the cultural perception that youth lack experience and expertise and highlights the respect given to elders. So these novice heads of departments have additional challenges, right, in their roles. So I would like to summarize the key findings and the implications. Heads of departments, middle leader position encompasses a breadth of roles that extend far beyond just acting as a connecting link between the teachers and the senior leaders. School reform has significantly impacted on their functions. Their role is recognized and valued within the respective schools, yet the recognition does not extend to the ministry level. There is a lack of structured leadership development it has hot self-belief, efficacy, and sense of inclusion. So since they don't have access to leadership training, they said we're not included into the senior leadership team. We are just teachers, and also it has impact on their identity. A recognition, trust, and support from senior leaders positively contribute to HEART's leadership identity. Novice heads of department experience particular challenges. And well, in conclusion, these findings highlight that leadership identity is dynamically constructed and reconstructed through diverse experiences, relationship interactions that within various contexts and role in which heads of departments live and work. Do I need to talk about this? No? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Well, with this, I think with this research, I wanted just to say how the research on middle leadership is very limited. It's not limited in Kazakhstan; it's limited everywhere, because the role is, although it's very important, it's really under-recognized, especially in the context like ours, where we do not really see middle leaders as real leaders. So I think with this research, we'll have more research in this topic. And I think that's a huge gap that we need to fill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisulu. Such rich findings. I would now request you just to discuss to the person sitting next to you, how do you react to these findings and what observations you have or what question you might ask? Okay, a couple of minutes before we ask